punchline for me, Eric, is just it's the power of that role and the power of that duo combination. So a visionary integrator that works, that they have a strong relationship, they trust each other, they're firing on all cylinders. The impact they can drive through their organization, through to the people in their organization and beyond, is unlike anything that you see.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, co-author of Rocket Fuel and founder of Rocket Fuel University, a guy I've been excited to get on the show for years now. This has been at least a year and a half in the works. Mark C. Winters. My man Mark, are you feeling unstoppable today?
So glad to be here, and so glad you finally made it to Flower Mound, Texas, man.
Yeah, I made it. We're here. And EOS came on my radar about 5 or 6 years ago. In my interviews, talking to people, and I think it was actually Traction that was first on my radar, the book Traction.
Sure.
And I think I heard it 2 or 3 times, and I picked up the book and I learned all about EOS. And then people started saying, like, we're using EOS. And then now, like, almost like once a month, EOS comes up in conversation. It's like exponentially growing awareness. Is that true? Is it just my imagination, or is it like growing fast right now?
Yeah, so grow might be an understatement. It's really taken off. And just to kind of give you a little context on that, the first exposure I had to EOS was back in 2012.
Okay.
And I found out about it through a webinar that Mike Payton did, and so made the pilgrimage to Detroit, met Gino, and fell in love with it, really, what I heard. And at that time, like when I first started my EOS journey as an implementer, there were probably a couple of dozen people in the room. That was about it when we've got all the implementers together.
Yeah.
So you fast forward to today, and that number's 1,000.
Yeah, and were you using terminology, EOS terminology right now that I'm sure will make more sense as we get going into today's interview? I can't wait to kind of dive into where you are starting us right now, like going further into your backstory and how you got into EOS and how you wrote the book Rocket Fuel. But let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Stay above the line.
Ooh, stay above the line. What do you mean by that?
Well, so I have a discipline that I follow I call it one place. And so every day I have one place that everything goes. It's actually a digital thing now, but it used to be a legal pad. And so I write down my plan for the day. I write down different things that come up during the day that I need to focus on. But across that page on my tablet is a hard line. And I put above that line those things that are really the high impact things that are driving me forward to achieve the goals I've set for the year, and my rocks for the quarter. You can start throwing some more EOS terms at you. And so my discipline is stay above that line. I've got some things below the line that are things that need to happen, things that need to get done, but I can't let those jump in front of those things that are above the line, because that's what keeps me focused on moving down the path that I want to go with intention.
When I hear that, I think of win tomorrow today, or like basically getting ready for the next day tonight or that morning, right? Being ahead of it and having your clear goals and having the lines of things that like the most important things I can accomplish that will move me towards those goals. And that's what I'm hearing, like stay above those most important things. Don't fall behind.
That's right. And there's another element of it for me, because I spend a lot of my time in sort of a creative space as I'm writing or developing new tools or new programs. And actually Tim Ferriss, who you're probably familiar with, right? So one of his sayings is make before manage. And so that's an important discipline for me to stick to, is if I will do my creative stuff first, then it doesn't get sacrificed later in the day, which is what it's always wanting to do, right? There's anything and everything that wants to tug me and pull me away from doing the things that I need to do there, spending the time that I need to spend. So if I can get in that zone, get in that flow early, and maybe it's just an hour, or maybe it's a couple of hours, but then sometimes I can kind of actually really get into it, and I can even stretch that longer. But if I can do those things first, if I truly can make before manage, those are the kinds of things that typically are above the line on my page.
I'm thinking of Brian C. Tracy right now and Darren Hardy, who in many ways their content, Eat That Frog, and what's the Darren's book is escaping my mind.
So, Entrepreneurial Roller Coaster?
That's one of them. Yeah. I think it's escaping my mind. It'll probably come to me as I get talking, but they really focus on this individual growth, right? Having like, what is like the most important thing you can focus on this year, and how do you reverse engineer that and focus and just tackle those biggest goals. But when I think of EOS, it's like that, but for organizations. Right. It's like scaling that mindset. So I think that's a great way to get started today. And before we kind of dive in more into like your role with EOS. Like, what were you doing before EOS?
Yeah, so I was your classic serial entrepreneur that sort of stumbled into it, really. I was a big corporate guy. So I worked for Procter & Gamble, and I was in a meeting one day, and it became apparent to me that my future actually laid entirely in the hands of this guy sitting across the table from me, and there was something just unnatural about that that felt really wrong. And so that sort of teed me up to be listening and kind of thinking. And then I was in business school at the time at the University of Chicago, and I was sitting there in class one day. I'll never forget. It was a pricing, strategy, and tactics class. And it was one of those classes where you do group projects. So the groups are bringing up their widget or their service concept in front of the class, and I'm sitting there listening to them. Remember, I'm working at Procter & Gamble at the time. I'm selling, diapers and coffee and juice. Procter & Gamble makes everything.
Past sponsor of the podcast, their Dawn dish detergent.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah, so I used to have a picture. It was funny. It was kind of a pile of all the P&G products at that time, and it was massive. I mean, people don't realize or appreciate how much stuff they have out there. Anyway, I was in that business, and I'm watching somebody walk before the class with their group and say, hey, we've invented this widget. It solves this problem, and there's this many people out there that need this problem. We can sell it for this much. It's going to cost us that much to make, so we're going to make this much money. Then the group after them, we've come up with this service need. It meets this unmet need in the marketplace. There's this many people. We can charge this much. It's going to cost this much to deliver it. And I was just fascinated by what I saw and thinking, wow, that is so much more interesting than what I'm doing every day, which is selling paper towels through a grocery store, basically, right? Yeah. And the future there in that world, and I had it mapped out. By the age of 43, I was going to be the CEO of Procter & Gamble. I knew exactly the path, how long everybody was going to be in their job. And
how old were you when you had this vision?
Oh gosh, I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
And so I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug, right? So as any good entrepreneur, I decided that I had to do this. And so that meant I walked on that job, and I basically quit. And funny thing about that story is my wife didn't find out that I quit until after I had done it.
Oh boy, how'd that go?
Well, she happened to be pregnant at the time, so not great is the short answer. And that's how I got all this gray hair that I've got.
It seemed to work out in the long run.
Silly things like that. Well, the good news is we're still very happily married and have 3 great kids, and so it all worked out in the end. But a lesson I would share with young would-be entrepreneurs is that's not the way to do it. In my mind, I was burning the ships, and I was making sure that nobody could tell me no. And so I was just jumping forward because I figured that would give me the best odds of success. But what you forget when you have other folks along for the ride with you is everybody's not wired for that ride.
Right.
And they're sort of getting drug along behind the bus, and can do a lot of damage and be a lot of pain for them, because it is like riding that roller coaster. And man, maybe they hate roller coasters, but that's just part of the entrepreneurial journey. So
yeah, and one of the things I've learned is that one piece of advice isn't universal. Like if you were 22 years old, right, and you didn't have a kid on the way, and you weren't married, like go all in, right? Because what do you have to lose? The more you can double down. But as soon as you hitch people to your wagon, like it's a different story.
Changes the game.
You got to find that balance. You got to figure out. You got to take that into consideration. Like you don't want to destroy your life in the pursuit of a dream.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
So you get the bug early.
Yeah.
You recognize that you gotta, one of your lessons is you gotta find balance early on. Where were you by the time EOS fell on your lap? When did that come?
Yeah, so I was way down the road. Yeah. At that point, I'd probably had 13 or 14 different companies.
Okay.
That I had either started myself, bought from somebody else, shut down or sold off, or whatever. All different kinds of experiences and outcomes and industries. Everything from super high tech things to manufacturing.
Okay.
And anything and everything in between. And some of them have worked out really, really well. One of them we had a 100x cash on cash return in less than 3 years.
Okay.
Other ones we lost the whole deal, and maybe more, right? And so scars all over my body to show from the lessons I've learned there. So I did that over a period of time, and eventually moved from kind of the operator seat to more of an advisory seat, and I started helping other people with their businesses.
When does that happen for people?
When you would make a shift like that?
Yeah, because that is something I picked up on the most successful restaurateurs. The evolution is you're the operator, and you just start building layers between you and the work, and eventually you're just this person who recognizes talent and a good idea, and then you just invest.
Yeah, so I think that's different for everyone. I think everybody has sort of a different blueprint that they're following, or a different pattern of what they're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to do. And so for me, one of the things that I figured out was I saw helping other people as leverage. So if I was just doing stuff myself, I can reach a certain circle, right, or a certain make a certain ripple in the ocean, if you will. But if I can help you do it, you're going to make your ripple. So I've had influence there.
Yep.
And then same thing over here and same thing over there. Now all of a sudden I've got all these signals that are sending out into the world. And so to me that felt like more impact.
100%.
So that's part of it. Part of it is also a risk thing, right? So early on, I got I have everything to lose, I guess, but that's the only way I was going to kind of get to where I wanted to go. So I'm taking chances.
You have time and energy too,
like crazy, right? A lot of time and energy. I don't have kids where I'm spending time coaching sports and doing all the other things that sort of come later. And so it's easier to kind of pour all your focus and attention into the build.
Yep.
And then later on, it's kind of like, what? I'd kind of like to travel. I'd kind of like to be sure I'm spending time with the family in the way I want to spend that time. I'm looking for leverage. I'm looking for different creative outlets for myself. So that's what led me through the advisory door.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
One image I like to, or like analogy I like to use, is when you're climbing the ladder, right? When you're growing yourself, when you're going up that chain of growth, when you get to the top, you can continue to do what you're doing, or you can help other people get to where you are. And if you can help pull people up that ladder, they can get to the top faster, right? And it's easier to pull people up than it is to push people up, right? So I think just that idea of getting to the top of wherever you're going and reaching down and giving somebody a hand to get to the top with you, when you do that, to your point, it ripples.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
And it's interesting. So, one of the first things that I did was I started forming peer groups. And, I grew up sort of in EO. Are you familiar with Entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
So I was a longtime member of the chapter here in Dallas, several terms on the board. And that's where I learned about Forum. And, I was the forum chair and a moderator for our forum and all that stuff. So I really appreciated the power of the peer group. So one of the first advisory type of things I got into was I started CEO peer groups for an organization called Vistage. You familiar with Vistage?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so a big CEO peer group.
That's out west?
They're international,
okay.
So they're huge.
Yeah.
And but I started 4 of these groups here in Dallas-Fort Worth, and one of the cool things is you've got 12 to 16 CEOs in the group, right? And all different businesses. So you've got all this diversity of thought and experience in the room, and so you learn a lot. And so that's different when you kind of get into the narrow niche of your own business and just that, and you're so buried in that, you're so focused on that, you lose a little bit of that perspective of kind of looking up and out. So that was really interesting for me. And one of the things that happened there, which is kind of leading to the lifting people up, is I had used an operating system in my business. Okay, not all of them. In the beginning, I didn't have an operating system, and that was a real, wild ride, as you can imagine. But later on, I figured out, hey, there's a better way to do this. So I had implemented a system, and that helped me. That helped me stay focused. That was better for the folks that were in the business with me, and it was more effective. It got us more of what we wanted. It was not EOS, right? Because EOS wasn't around way back then. But as I got into this, facilitating these peer groups, people in the group knew that, and they would be like, Mark, hey, will you help us implement a system like you did? And my first reaction to that was, well, no, because that's really hard. It was really hard for me to do that. So I don't want to, I'm trying to make my life simpler here. I'm not trying to make it harder. So, you just, and they kind of keep working on me. Come on, just help us get started. Just help us get started. So I finally did. I said, okay, I'll help you get started. And what I found was I loved it. It was really interesting for me. I got to teach, right? And I got to, really facilitate the answers out of them. I'm not the answer guy. They have the answers, but helping them find it and get it out. And then coaching them to kind of push them along and show them, hey, here's what the other side looks like when they hit that point when it really gets difficult and challenging and they want to quit. Yeah, but here's why we're doing it. Here's what it looks like. I got to the other side. You can get to the other side. Here's these other people that have done it. It's worth it, right? And kind of pushing them through. That turned out to be a really charge for me, right?
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing and recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master of restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network. And this being systems, processes, procedures, protocols, habits, like rituals, things like this, like daily, weekly, quarterly, annual, if this, then that.
That's right. And clarity of vision. Right. So it's all kind of just wasted energy if you're running around in circles and not really going anywhere. You need that direction.
What were your biggest inspirations up to this point before going all in on EOS in terms of like how to implement and create a system?
Yeah. So, well, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by inspirations.
Like, where did you go to do it for yourself? And what were your resources teaching other people up to this point?
Yeah, so I mean, Vern Harnish had been a big inspiration for me. He's somebody that I had followed and liked the framework that he put together, and that's what I had used in several of my businesses, you know.
Okay.
And so a lot of those principles were kind of where I started.
Okay.
And so early in that process, actually very early, Vistage used to have this thing called a Fridays with Vistage webinar. And so every Friday they'd have some expert do some kind of webinar on some piece of content, and it was just a great learning opportunity. And one of those was Mike Payton, and who obviously an early EOS implementer, very influential person in our community. Has written several of the important books around the EOS ecosystem. And so Mike gave this webinar, and I watched it, and I just kind of saw the breakdown of the system. I was kind of like, that's really great. That's really simple. That's really elegant. I like that better than the way I'm doing it.
That was my follow-up question. What was missing from the way you were doing it to what EOS was?
Yeah. So to me, it's like, imagine you're on the side of a canyon and you can see the other side of where you want to go. There was a more direct path with EOS of the steps to follow and the process to use to get from this side to that side.
Yeah.
That was the thing that was new. That was the thing that was really enticing to me.
And at this point when Mike gave this presentation, was this the first time you had ever heard of EOS?
Never heard of it before.
So just a little context, there's the book Traction. Gino Wickman wrote the book Traction. In that book, he introduces the idea of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And then it seems like EOS kind of takes a life of its own at this point. Is that safe to say?
It is.
Yeah. So, and Mike Payton is the co-author of Get a Grip, past guest in the show. You're the last before I think get to Renee Bauer, and once I get Renee on the show, then I have a full house.
You got the Traction library. You got the set, the collector's
So that's
set.
the goal. Hopefully in the fall I'll be connecting with Renee.
That's great.
So anyway, so Mike is out there. This is around 2012.
Yeah.
Where he's kind of spreading the word, the gospel of EOS,
Yeah, exactly.
and what you describe a direct path is exactly nothing that I read in Traction or looking at EOS was new in terms of the information.
Right.
It's all been said before.
Right.
We know vision is important. We know values are important. We know having a goal is important.
Timeless principles.
But it's taking all these bits and pieces that we all have heard of in countless books and then laying it out in a step-by-step. That's what I think Gino did that was different at that time, or the way he communicated it was powerful.
Yeah, he obsesses about simplicity.
Yeah.
He really does. And so he takes all this stuff and kind of looks at it and distills it down to its most simple form, really, which is easy for people to get their head around, but more importantly, or certainly as importantly, easy to execute, easy to follow through and do. So that's his genius. And so he put it in place, and then he tested the heck out of it, right? So he saw what worked, he saw what didn't work, and he just kind of kept doubling down until he, literally by himself, pretty much proved that it worked. And then Don Tenney came on board, and then Mike Payton and Renee Bohr, and several of the other early folks that just began to replicate the kind of results that Gino had seen with his clients, and that sort of opened the door.
So which parts of EOS, the way that Gino Wickman laid out, were you missing up to this point? In terms of, you said you had your own process of laying out, like helping other people develop process, but where were you falling short? Like, how did
I had no intention of developing my own process. Again, this was a sideline to what my core thing at that point, which was facilitating these peer groups. I wasn't even thinking about, I should make a system. It really wasn't. It was just kind of bits and pieces, odds and ends that I had picked up through my experience, that I was sharing with these members of my peer groups. That it was probably literally just a couple of months in before I saw the thing with Mike. I go to Detroit, Gino and I meet, we become fast friends. I go, this is a better way. I come back. Anybody I was talking to about that, now I'm talking to them about EOS. And then what happened was, it was like a runaway train, because I'm spending all this time facilitating these peer groups, a little bit of time, helping people implement a system. And then all of a sudden the demand just kind of blew up over here to where I can't do both. It's too much. And this was the one I really loved. I was really getting the charge out of implementing EOS.
That one being EOS, yeah. So at this point, did they even have integrators? Was that even like...
It was there. So
implementers.
Implementers, yes. So, and there were a couple of different evolutions of the business model, the structure on how that was being served up from Gino and Don. And so when I came in, when I went to Detroit, there were probably, I think I counted up the other day, there were 26 people in the room. So, me, Gino, Don, Mike, Walt Brown, Renee Bohr, just kind of a really, really small couple dozen people. And at the time, there was nobody in the state of Texas, zero. The closest implementer to me on the map was in Des Moines, Iowa.
Wow.
And fast forward to today, there's now, I think there's over 50 implementers in Dallas.
Wow.
And over 100 in the state of Texas.
What is an implementer versus an integrator?
Yeah, great. So, unfortunately, the words are...
I'm just starting to get I always mess them up.
They're too similar. but the implementer is the one that helps the business implement EOS.
Got it.
Okay, so they're the facilitator, the teacher, the coach that moves them along the journey to master the tools within EOS and really get a good, strong implementation in their organization.
If you want to implement EOS, you go to an implementer.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is what you were in Detroit becoming at this time?
That's correct. Yeah. So I went to Detroit to learn more, and ultimately I became an implementer of EOS, a professional implementer. So not just somebody that grabbed the book and said, "Oh yeah, I'm an expert in this." Right.
Got it.
So that's it. So to close the loop there, the difference is the integrator is an execution-oriented role inside the organization that works, glove in hand with the visionary to go execute the vision and make it happen.
Got it.
Okay. So think of it as integrator is an internal role that's much more broad than just the operating system, and an implementer is an external role that comes in and helps implement EOS as effectively as possible.
What was your vision for yourself at this point in 2012? Like, what were you trying to create for yourself?
Yeah, so I'm thinking I'm in an advisory role. I'm helping businesses, get more of whatever it is that they want from their business, which I had lived. I'd been that entrepreneur that saw what I wanted, jumped in, and then went through the reality, which sucked, of, I'm working my tail off. I'm not making any money. This isn't making a difference. I can't get unstuck, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes making it out the other side and sometimes not, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to help more of them do that, because I have a deep respect and appreciation for that entrepreneur, having felt those things and watching the real impact that entrepreneurs have on our world. Yeah. I truly believe that the entrepreneur is the answer to most of the most pressing challenges we have as a society right now.
Right, for sure. Actually pull back a layer on that. Why do you think that that's the case?
Because they make the moves, they take the risks, and they influence and impact so many people, both inside their organization and outside.
Yes, dude, you just hit a chord with me. My mission statement is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the restaurant industry. And I believe the restaurant industry, more than any other industry, has the power to change the world precisely for the reasons
they touch so many people.
They touch so many people. They're at the core of every community. They are usually the first impressions for so many people when they're entering into the workforce. If you enter into the workforce at an organization that has high standards and exists to serve, and like you raise the bar and the expectation of the future worker, and you literally mold the future, and it just ripples out.
100%. And you're planting seeds, right? So these people that grow up in your restaurant, let's say, and then they get inspired, they see what's great or they see what's terrible, and then they go do one, right? And it just multiplies. So it's just you're growing seeds, you're having an impact that just multiplies and multiplies.
So Rocket Fuel was written in 2015.
Released in 2015.
Released in 2015. Written since between 2012 and 2015.
Took a minute.
Yeah. So what was it about you and Gino, this pairing, that made you like? How did this partnership on Rocket Fuel come into fruition?
Yeah. So I mean, it's funny, when I became an implementer, it was sort of a perfect storm for me because I had been an entrepreneur in this market for a long, long time. I had experience using a system, not EOS, but I understood what impact a system could have for your business and getting what you wanted. I had a nice network of folks in the entrepreneurial community here because I had been in that community through EO and other things, and Vistage for that matter. And so it was sort of a perfect storm. When I came back and I'm like, all right, this EOS thing, I like it a lot. It just really took off fast. And so, that got Gino's attention a little bit. And so pretty quickly, really within the first 6 months, Gino sort of throws out the idea to the room of, hey, thinking about writing a book on this visionary integrator thing that he had created in developing the accountability chart and using his clients. And I said, hey, I'd be interested in that. And so, pretty quickly, we decided to do that project together. And then that led to me living in his brain for about a year.
What was that like?
It was crazy. There's insanity in there.
Yeah, I've met him once in my life. I had him on the show as well. I don't know if I told you that, but you can tell he's on a different vibration.
He's such a great guy. I mean, he's just such a wonderful human. He really is, and a genius in his own right. And he's one of those really rare folks that we talk about who's wired in such a way that he's very visionary, but he's also very integrator. And he can do that stuff. He's a better integrator than I.
Very rare.
He is super rare.
Yeah.
And but he's more capable as an integrator than I am. And so anyway, we get to live in each other's brains for a year as we kind of develop that concept and really the structure. The thing about Rocket Fuel was it's helping people understand what a visionary and integrator is, which we can talk about, but more importantly, putting a structure around that to take the natural friction of two people that are very differently wired naturally and finding a way to blend that into something positive and powerful that drives that business to the higher level.
And I'm going on a whim here and saying the majority of the people listening to this podcast probably would fall into the category of entrepreneur. They are CEO, entrepreneur, dreamers, constantly just like feeding the funnel with new perspective and knowledge, which is probably why they get distracted so often, because they're constantly being the shiny ball syndrome.
That happens.
So I'm assuming that, as I think 80% of my listeners are restaurant owners.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are some integrators, or maybe there's some Gino Wickman type out there that are a little bit of both, right? So what is it like? How did you guys land on the title Rocket Fuel? Like, what is Rocket Fuel specifically?
Yeah. So great story. So again, we're writing the book, and we had the structure outlined pretty quickly, and so we're just working this process where one of us would write, and then we'd send it to the other one, and they would kind of edit and write, and we'd kind of have a back and forth on a chapter that'd go on for a while until we got it to 80-90%, and then we'd lock that one down, we'd move on, and we'd do the next one and kind of repeat. We'd kind of take turns leading and following until we would get there. So we're doing this, and meanwhile we needed some kind of a working title for the project, right? So we had some of the worst working titles that you can imagine, like the Visionary Integrator Dynamic, or the Visionary Integrator Revolution. Just not anything sexy at all. So my clients that I'm working with, they knew I was working on a book, and so one day one of the clients says, "Hey, Mark, that book, how's that going?" "Oh man, it's going good. We're making progress. We're about halfway through, whatever." And he goes, "What are you calling it?" So I rattled off about 3 of these working titles, and he's just shaking his head in disappointment. He's like, he can't believe how bad they are. And he goes, let me tell you. He goes, "The title for your book is Rocket Fuel." And I'm like, "Okay, John, explain. Tell me why that's the title of the book." And he goes, "Well, we had this profiling company come in recently. And, profiling companies will look at how the different members of the team are kind of wired and kind of explain how the differences work together, what's easy, what's hard, how to manage that. So he had the profiles for everybody on the team, and he would take 2 of the reports and he'd kind of hold them up and say, okay, are these peers, or is this one the manager, or is this one the manager? How's this relationship work? And so he picks up 2 and he says, which way? And say, okay, it's like this. This one's the manager and this one works for them. And he looks at him and he goes, oh my gosh. He goes, this is going to be rocket fuel for your company. And it just happened. He had picked up the visionary's profile and the integrator's profile. And it was just one of those things where the 2 pieces fit together in an extremely powerful way. And I thought about it and I'm like, I really like that. And so I went on a run that afternoon, and I remember stopping about halfway through the run after I'd kind of noodled this for a while, and I texted Gene and I told him the story. I'm like, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And he's like, love it. And so then we shared it with the publisher, and the publisher's like, that's so much better than what you guys were originally thinking.
It really is a great title, and I don't know if this might be a stretch, but I have a aviation background, right? And I know that with fuel in anything, like whether it be a car or an airplane, it's about finding the sweet spot ratio of fuel to air. Right. And you need to have that sweet spot ratio to have the optimum combustion.
Yep.
And that's really what the integrator visionary
is.
It's about having this balance.
Yeah.
And when you find that balance, it's like the sky's the limit.
It's the fuel and the oxidizer and the proper mix and the proper structure that lets it compress and focus that energy to drive forward the vehicle, which is the business.
So would you say that, I guess the question is where do most entrepreneurs and visionaries struggle with finding their rocket fuel or their opposite to become rocket fuel?
Yeah, so let's get into that sort of through the side door. So first, when you think about the struggles that visionaries have, what's getting in their way of getting whatever it is that they want, one that I see a lot is just they're not clear. They don't have a clear vision for where they're trying to go. 2, which you alluded to a little bit earlier, is they don't stay focused. They get clear, but they look over here, they look over there. One of my good friends says that the biggest threat to the visionary's great idea is their next great idea. Right? Because it comes up, right? You feel it. And then the third thing that I see most often is they don't have that execution-oriented counterpart, and they're missing it. So they're not like Gino, and they just aren't good at that. They're not good at follow-through. They're not good at details. They're not good at staying focused. They're not good at They're not good at holding people accountable, right? That's another one.
Yeah, when listening to the book, I listened to it like recently just to have it be fresh in my mind. And you kind of start in the book and you're talking about like, do these things sound familiar? Can you relate with any of these qualities? Then you might be an entrepreneur. I'm over there like one of those sports like bobbleheads, like shaking my head. I'm like, yeah, that's me, 100%. So it's just like it hit the first time I listened to it, it hit close to home, and I'm like, it's really hitting close to home right now too. But so back on your train of thought. Yeah.
So the question is, if I'm missing that and I don't want to just kind of spin in place and never really go anywhere, then how do I go get it? And the reality is there's kind of 3 paths there. One is they're already there, and we just call it out and label it, because believe it or not, there are a fortunate few that have that person on their team kind of doing that for them right now. They just don't realize that that's what it's called, but that's how they're using it, and it's working, right? So we call it out and we make it visible. The second thing is maybe they're there, but they're not doing that for you. But boy, they could. They're certainly capable, and if we just kind of move them around in the structure here, we can step them into that seat.
Yeah, they're on the bus.
They're on the bus, right? They're just not in that seat yet. So we discover that, make that visible, and find a way to transition them into that seat, which sometimes is a fast thing, sometimes it's a slow thing, so it just depends. And then the third path is they're not here, and I'm doing it, and I'm stinking it up. Right? So I got to go outside. I've got to find a way to go out into the world and find this person.
Yeah, that's the hard one. I think that's the one that you don't want to be like, because the amount of work that you must go into just filtering and finding and interviewing. Yeah. This is a big part of your organization, usually partner level.
Yeah.
Like, safe to say?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, so psychologically, for sure, it's, you'll hear people call it their business spouse, right? So
maybe the most expensive employee you have.
Well, expensive in terms of what you pay them, and also in terms of what you invest in the relationship.
Time,
right? So, and energy, and psychic energy, right? Yeah. So, I mean, when it doesn't work, it hurts.
Yeah. So, again, this is Restaurant Unstoppable,
Yeah.
right? So how this manifests when listening to you talk, where you see this often, there's always seems to be a chef general manager combination where the chef is the dreamer, the creative, the energy, the attractive character, and the GM generally is the one that keeps the wheels on the restaurant.
Yeah.
Like what's like, they're paying attention to the numbers, they're looking at the P&Ls, they're ordering the food, and they're hiring, they're doing HR, all this type of stuff. And you almost, in my nearly 1,200 episodes, like there's always seems to be like this perfect combination of creativity and like order and operations. As you scale, that becomes CEO and COO. That's kind of how you see it manifest in that world. And over the past week, I feel like having you on the show is perfect timing because I did 5 interviews in the past week.
Okay.
I had the CEO of McNelly's Group in Tulsa. I don't know if you're familiar.
What brands?
McNelly's Bar, a bunch of brands. Like I can't keep track. I do 5 or 6 interviews a week, and then each one of my guests has 5 or 10 restaurants, so it's hard to keep.
Right.
But I had the CEO and the COO on back to back, and then I had the CEO of the Social Order in Oklahoma City, Jones Assembly. Have you heard of Jones Assembly?
That's familiar.
Yeah. And then the director of operations for the Jones Assembly. And then I had a husband and wife front of house chef combination. Okay. And then after that, I had the CEO of 84 Hospitality, Rachel Cope, who doesn't have a opposite. She's a visionary CEO, but she doesn't have the COO person. But what she did is she outsourced to consulting to help with systems, processes, procedures, and she's hiring fractional executives.
Okay.
So there's all these different examples of like there is no one path. Like you can like what's going through your mind as I'm sharing these different examples. Are those examples of the combination?
Yeah. So I mean, you're on the pattern, right? And then the path for how they get there is very varied. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways that can kind of come about. But you sort of started with finding that you don't have them already inside your shop is tough, but that's the most common situation. And typically what happens is somebody reads the book Rocket Fuel, the visionary reads it first, they read chapter 1 and they love it because that chapter is about them.
Yeah.
And it sounds very familiar and they're like, oh wow, this people are in my brain and blah, blah, blah. They read chapter 2 and that describes the integrator and they kind of get, oh wow, yeah, that could really help me with the stuff that I'm missing. And then they go, I want one. They may even stop reading at that point because they've got what they needed to get, right? And they start trying to figure out, how do I fill that gap? And that is where it gets hard. And there's sort of a structure that we've developed that helps you think about it. There's a 7-step process in the book, but I want to kind of paint the simpler picture of what you're doing there. And we think of it as a 3-piece puzzle. So if you can imagine, we talk about the visionary and the integrator as a 2-piece puzzle, right? So you're trying to get these pieces that fit together, that are complementary. They don't overlap too much. And when we put them together, they don't have too many things that between them they're missing. So if we're a really strong pair, we're both really strong in the things that the other is just not strong in, right? So then we look at how those 2 pieces fit together with the 3rd piece. The 3rd piece is the business, okay? And so on that connection, there's a spectrum of how much visionary does our business need and how much integrator does our business need. Okay, so on the visionary side, you can think of complex businesses that have, in your world, that have lots of locations, that have a very complex menu and all different kinds of weird logistical challenges, stuff like that, right? That's going to need a lot more visionary with it than something that's just a simple, we do one thing and we do it great.
Yeah. Although I think the restaurant industry is at this weird point right now where there's almost a shift happening where it's no longer enough just to do good food and to have a good restaurant. The restaurant's presence is extending beyond the 4 walls, where now marketing is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the success of having a social media strategy and marketing strategy. And now you're not just serving food, but every week you need to have a new event to stay, because we're really in the experience of, or the business of creating experiences, and the never ending like rollout of like new experiences and the coordination. And I would, as somebody who identifies as like a visionary, would be so overwhelmed with having to constantly reinvent and put system and process, all those things.
So here's what I'm thinking of. Probably the most amazing restaurant I've ever been in. You ever see the documentary Hero Loves Sushi?
Oh, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Okay, so it's about a sushi restaurant in Tokyo.
Yep.
That's in a subway station, basically, underground. And 10 chairs, 10 seats, sushi. Omakase, so he's set menu, right?
Yep.
So that's it. That's all they do. One seating, that's it. So they're not worried about marketing at all. They're not worried about anything but the craft, right? So there was a certain kind of visionary there for just the focus being on excellence and just the best that you could possibly be at doing that thing, right? Versus all the different variables. If we're trying to create this, experience that's way beyond just the food. We're trying to create demand. We're trying to grow, so we're trying to pop units and enter new markets, and
right.
We're trying to, spin this concept into 2 or 3 different concepts. That's what I'm talking about in terms of complexity that requires a different kind of integrator than the integrator that's just making sure that we go to the fish market and we pick out the best stuff, and then we prepare it and we have the process and all that kind of stuff. It's just it's a different thing. So there's a spectrum there. So all my point is, on the visionary side, whatever it is because usually it's the visionary that's kind of driving this.
Yep.
They're the founder, right? So really the question is, how much integrator do we need in this business? And is it the kind of thing that has all this scale where you got thousands and thousands of employees and regulatory stuff that we're dealing with and all that stuff, versus something that's just very, very simple, different integrators that we may need. So if you imagine this 3-piece puzzle and the integrator piece is missing, we first understand the edge of that visionary, and then we understand the edge of the business, and by default we back into the shape of this integrator we need to go out in the world and find.
Yeah. Now, listening to you talk, it makes me feel like there could be a scenario where there's the entrepreneur, the business, and then maybe it's multiple integrators. And in the world of restaurants, where you have the chief operations officer, the chief human officer,
Mm-hmm.
the chief culinary, like there's so many different elements of where you really need a specialty person for each one of these different arms that the industry has.
So play that at a higher level. So the accountability chart, one of the tools in the EOS toolbox, right, that really maps this out. And it's the simple chart that shows what needs to get done, that's clustered together in human sizes where somebody can manage it, that then has direct line accountabilities to someone else in the organization for that stuff, right? So that's basically what an accountability chart does for us. So at the highest level, you've got the visionary, and then we've got the integrator reporting into them. And effectively, everybody else, every other function in the organization is reporting into that integrator who is pulling it all together. Because if they're not pulling it all together, who would be?
The CEO, who should not be doing it.
Exactly right, right? So that's the whole point, is we're trying to protect them from that, and be a filter of sorts for the messaging and ideas flowing down from the visionary into the organization. So we bring forward the things that are high leverage, but we sort of stay away from the crazy stuff that could really hurt us or do damage. So to your point, though, I might have a restaurant organization that has 3 different brands, that have stores and all kinds of stuff. So the question as you structure that accountability chart is, okay, what kind of things are we sort of going to push into shared services? Back office stuff is a typical candidate for that.
Accounting,
HR, IT, blah, 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 point of sale, whatever. All that kind of stuff falls over there. Sometimes the marketing is where we can kind of have a center of excellence there that's just taking the same expertise that they know and pointing at this brand or this market or that market. But then operationally is where it tends to kind of split apart. It sort of has to manage the different brands or to manage the different markets. And then the game is kind of, okay, how many different ones can we handle before we have to consolidate again? So if I've got, a sales and marketing function, I've got a finance and administrative function, and maybe I've got 2 or 3 brands in the middle, an integrator could potentially pull all of those things together. But if I've got 7 or 8 brands, it's too wide. It's too much stuff for that one person to pull together. So I probably need to have somebody that's an head of ops that's sort of pulling all that operational stuff back together again. And so it tends to expand and consolidate as long as we're keeping the span of control manageable for really everybody in the structure.
Yeah. So if we're going through this journey, we found our integrator, or if we're the integrator, we found our visionary or our CEO. What is the secret to making this relationship work? What can we do to be proactive and make sure we go the distance? Yeah.
So this is where the 5 rules come into play, and that's really the structure that takes us. Think about how we're wired. So if I'm a visionary that's tons of ideas. I'm thinking about the future. I'm externally focused. I'm, moving and shaking and doing all kinds of stuff out here. Versus if I'm the one who's really driving things internally, I'm, obsessed with the details and the follow through and making sure that we keep our commitments and all that kind of stuff, right? And holding people accountable. That's a really big one. They're naturally going to want to fight. They're naturally going to butt heads. And so think of that as friction. Recognize that friction is normal and healthy.
Hey, you need friction to have traction, right?
You do. And in fact, you think about it as a polar charge in the relationship, where if we can get those poles as far apart, we can actually get a greater charge, right? And to a certain point, we might break it, but we try to maximize that charge. So the structure of the 5 rules is all about how do we blend that into positive power that can drive us forward to the next level. So, first of the 5 rules is to stay on the same page. Stay on the same page. And that's first for a reason, because sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. And often it's the thing that they think they're doing a good job of because they talk all the time. But in reality, they're talking in passing, and it's kind of quick hit, surface level, transactional stuff, and it's not the deeper stuff. That's the stuff that's really bugging them. That's the stuff that they're really not aligned on, the stuff they really haven't, worked through yet. That if you don't create the space to talk about that, you don't.
What up, Unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing and recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
And this manifests in the monthly same page meeting?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, well, at least monthly. So the prescription is at least once a month you sit down with your counterpart, and it's a super simple agenda that says, all right, what's on your mind? And what are the issues?
Yeah.
To use another EOS term. And the issues that we should be talking about there are anything that's kind of driving you nuts, anything that you feel like we're not on the same page on, anything that you're concerned we might be getting off the same page on, and anything that's kind of coming down the pipe that you're wanting to make darn sure ahead of time, proactively, that we get aligned and stay on the same page. And so you lay out that issues list, and sometimes, particularly the integrator will have that list beforehand. Visionary may not. That's okay. We start off, what do you want to have on the list? And so whatever process you use to kind of put that stuff together. And then a lot of times it's just kind of taking turns. Hey, what's the next one you've got? You do one, I'll do one, you do one, I'll do one. But the idea is in that same page meeting, we sort of lock the doors. We stay in that session, that meeting, until we have gotten aligned on all the things on that list.
Got it. So step one, or the first rule, stay on the same page. And then to do that, schedule monthly time, same page meeting. Is that what it's called? Yeah, same page meeting.
Yep.
So what's the second rule?
So let's see if I can remember these off the top of my head. So number 2 is probably no end runs.
No end runs. I was listening to this at times too, and I thought it said no interruptions, but I was like, did I write that right? Because what would you say?
No interruptions, no end runs.
And end runs.
Yeah, an interruption. It's not really an interruption, although it creates one. But think about the accountability chart. Okay, so you've got the different seats on the accountability chart, and an end run is when someone goes around their manager to the person above them. So imagine a new integrator gets put in place in the organization, in the accountability chart. They weren't there before. Before that seat was there, all these other leaders reported directly to the visionary, right? And so now there's a seat in between us. And a lot of times people, not with bad intention, but just because of old habits, because they've always they'll go right past the integrator's office and they'll go into the visionary's office and go, hey, what am I supposed to do about this? And they basically unload on them and ask them to make a decision or give direction to them. Now, if the visionary does that, what does that do in terms of setting up the integrator for success?
Yeah, maybe they might have a different opinion.
Yeah, right. So, effectively, you're cutting that integrator off at the knees. If, as a visionary, you just drive the ship, right? So that doesn't work. The other thing that happens is the visionary, again, old habits, they'll go right past the integrator's office and they'll go out somewhere in the organization. They'll go, oh, do this, do that. And they start giving direction and making decisions out there in the field or wherever. And same thing, the integrator had all these plans, had everything set up, and everything was working in a certain way, and then the visionary just goes out there and kind of yanks it all around and messes it up, okay? So neither one of those is great, and really is not what you want to do if you want your integrator to be able to be effective. So to fight that, to counteract that, we teach the visionary something that we call the question, okay? And the question is simply this. When someone comes into their office and tries to get them to make that decision or give that direction, they can listen, so they can take in the information, right, hear what they've got to say. And then when they get done, you say, okay, are you going to tell the integrator or am I going to tell the integrator? Because somebody's got to tell the integrator.
Right.
And what we see in practice is if they will do that, if they will truly embrace that discipline, within about 30 days, you'll drive this behavior out of the organization.
Because it's going to end up going to the integrator eventually, so you might as well just go straight there.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly
so
right.
really, it's like just respecting the chain of command both ways.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you don't communicate, right? So I want that visionary rocking and rolling all over the place and talking to people, hearing what they've got to say, asking questions, so the communication can flow very freely, but the line is giving direction or making a decision. We want that to land at the place where the person actually has accountability for it.
So what's this word? Is it end run? I've never heard this word.
End run.
Spell it for me.
Like END.
Okay.
RUN.
Okay.
It's an end run. It's running around the end.
Got it.
So
that's number 2 in the 5 rules. No end runs. Starting with, first one was stay on the same page. Second one is no end runs. And then the third one, because I have them written out here conveniently, is the integrator is the icebreaker.
Close. The integrator. This is great. The
integrator. It's the tiebreaker. Sorry. I don't know why I said icebreaker.
That's fantastic.
It's the tiebreaker.
Tiebreaker, yeah. So the integrator is the tiebreaker. And so here's what happens. So we want decisions to live at the level of where we want the accountability to sit, right? So ultimately, I want sales responsible for selling stuff.
Yeah.
I want ops responsible for, keeping the promise and making sure our service levels are high and delivering the product. I want finance responsible or accountable for making sure that, our numbers are accurate and timely and all that kind of good stuff, right? So if that accountability sits at the appropriate level, those people are making decisions and we're holding them accountable for those decisions. But every once in a while, you get a bigger thing that is a little bit more strategic. Maybe it's cross-functional, so it kind of cuts across things. And you get a situation where, let's say that ops is saying we need to go left and sales is saying we need to go right. And they can't get unstuck. So they're hearing each other, they're doing their best, but they just can't get past it. So at that point, we can't stay stuck. That's what will kill us, right? So we got to make a call. So the integrator swings in, hears both sides effectively in the context of the vision, the shared vision, and the greater good of the entire organization, and then they make the call. And they make the call, not the visionary, because that integrator is just closer to the ground. They know more of the details about what's going on and what the current constraints are and all that. They're just in a better position, but they do so with accountability. So the visionary is holding them accountable for that decision being the right call.
Got it. So number 1 in these 5 rules, stay on the same page. Number 2, no end runs. Number 3, the integrator is the tiebreaker. And then number 4 is you are an employee when working in the business.
Oh, this is a good one for your audience. So this is speaking to owners who are also working in the business. Okay. And what we teach here is that
this might be hitting home with a lot of my listeners.
Yeah. So listen close. So ownership gives you 2 benefits. Okay. One benefit is your right to your share of the profits, however we've drawn up that those get split. Second is your right to a voice in the major decisions of the business. I did not say all the decisions of the business, but the major ones, the biggies. So are we going to take on new partners? Are we going to take on debt? Are we going to open a new location? Are we going to, buy a building or sell a building, or, the biggies, right? And to ask questions and get your information, your curiosity fulfilled. That's it, okay? It does not say that you have a right to be an employee in the business. And that's going to maybe hit some people right in the face. What we want to be true, what we need to be true, is that if somebody is going to work in the business, and go back to that accountability chart and all the seats we're trying to fill, all the seats on the bus, right? If we're going to put an owner in one of those seats, it must be true that they are the best option we have. We couldn't go out into the world and hire somebody for that seat that would be better than that owner we just put in there. And they have to be held accountable for it, just like some person that we hired off the street. They can't play what we call the owner's card that says, oh, no, that doesn't apply to me. I'm an owner. I don't have to be at that meeting. I'm an owner. I don't have to hit those numbers. I'm an owner, right? That changes everything for the whole system and really blows the integrity of what we're trying to do here. So when you are acting as an employee, if you're going to do that, you have to play by the rules, just like all the other employees in the accountability chart.
So what is the title of these 5 rules again? Like at the very top, the 5 rules to a productive VI relationship.
Yeah, we just call them the 5 rules.
Okay.
But it's if I was going to expand the title, it's the 5 rules to maximize your visionary integrator relationship.
And so far we've covered stay on the same page, no end runs, the integrator is the tiebreaker, and you are an employee when you're working in the business. And the last one is,
I know it, maintain mutual respect.
Yes, nailed it.
Hey,
I mean, that one sounds like a no-brainer. Why is it so important?
Well, so because it doesn't naturally happen sometimes, right? And so the punchline here is the integrator is not your lackey. They're not less than. They're not someone that you look down on and that all the crap rolls down on them. But they're your eye-level partner, meaning that you need to be able to lean into them, and they must be strong enough to lean back into you. If they're not, you're probably, if you're a good visionary, going to just bulldoze them and just blow right through them. Or sometimes I describe it as melting them. A lot of times visionaries are so intense and just run at such a high frequency that they will literally melt an integrator if that integrator is not strong enough.
Yeah. We've covered a lot of the big things I want to cover today. I do want to leave a teaser if you have not yet checked out the book, Rocket Fuel. And the full working title, I think I wrote it down somewhere. What is the full working title? I know that's not it, but
I think it's how to get more of what you want from your business.
Yeah.
The one essential combination to help you get more of what you want from your business.
So
you're asking me these hard questions.
Yeah. So I do want to give a little teaser at the very end of the book. You talk about basically the 7 steps. I don't think we can get through all those today. And you also share 5 tools. Yeah. I believe it's 5 tools. Yeah. So quick teaser, highlight like 30,000 foot, go over the 7 steps.
So the 7 steps actually.
And how to find your match.
Yeah, the 3-piece puzzle I described for you earlier is a better short version of the 7 steps. Just the punchline for the visionary is it starts with truly understanding yourself. So the first 4 steps are about that. Who are you, how are you, so we understand that shape of the visionary edge of the puzzle piece. That tells us what we're looking for in the shape of the complementary piece.
Got it.
So that's really what the 7 steps is all about. And then getting the word out through your network, through a recruiter. There are recruiters that specialize in finding integrators now. So it's sort of, developed this whole cottage industry around the role at this point. In fact, many people have adopted the integrator title on LinkedIn.
Really?
Oh, yeah. So you go search LinkedIn for an integrator, and you'll find all kinds of folks.
Yeah.
And we even have an integrator community that's an EOS-sponsored integrator community. We call it the Integrator Mastery Forum. So there's some people that are in that they've been trained. They've been through our integrator masterclass for what it looks like to truly be great as an integrator. That's where we teach them. So anyway, there's lots of different pathways you can take to help you find them.
And you go into detail in the book, at the very end of the book, like all the things you just mentioned. If you guys want to go take this knowledge deeper, I highly recommend the book, Rocket Fuel. It's on Audible. I know we're a lot of audio listeners in the restaurant industry. I am curious, list those 5 tools for me. Actually, let me reframe this question. If I were to go out tomorrow and do a EOS workshop where I'm covering the operational side of EOS, the different processes that you're leveraging in EOS, what would the title of those workshops be to round off a holistic workshop approach to EOS?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question there.
So, for example, like we know that we need to have the hierarchy, right? Or like with all like you got to draw out the hierarchy and have. You call it something different, don't you?
The accountability chart.
Accountability. Thank you. The accountability chart. Level 10 meetings. Annual meetings. Like what are the?
So we call these the foundational tools.
Got it.
So maybe that's kind of what you're after.
Yes.
So the number one here is the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer, which answers what we call the core questions, the 8 core questions about your business. And this is where we get that clarity, thinking about the visionary integrator relationship again, of, all right, where are we really trying to go with this thing? That's super important to get on the same page with your integrator about. Second thing from there is the accountability chart. So that structural tool that lets you be intentional about the structure that you think is going to have the highest probability of getting you from where you are to this next place you're trying to go, maybe looking 12 to 18 months down the road, right? Gives you that roadmap and lets you start moving your structure into that into that piece. From there, we've got rocks. So what are those priorities that we're going to be laser focused on for the next 90 days that are going to be those most impactful things? Remember my stay above the line statement at the beginning? So the things that are really above the line for you. Next thing is the meeting pulse. So that includes your 2-day annual planning, your 1-day quarterly planning, and then your weekly level 10 meeting, which is 90 minutes that you're spending together with your leadership team, catching up on where we stand on everything, having some accountability around how we're doing on the rocks and the to-dos, and then spending a big chunk of time really working on the issues, the things that you currently see that could be getting in the way of where you're trying to go. And then the fifth one is your scorecard. So the handful of measurables that you look at every week, right? And you look for those patterns and things that kind of begin to jump out that help you ultimately see issues sooner than you would have if you hadn't been watching those numbers, right? And the idea there is, you're driving down the road, rather than just kind of waking up in the ditch, you see yourself headed towards the ditch and you can bring it back on the road before you end up over there.
Got it. How many total, like where is EOS today in terms of like numbers and scale? Like, do you have any KPIs you can share there in terms of like how many like integrators are you? I think you already said like 10,000.
Well, no. So implementers, we're at about 1,000.
1,000 implementers.
Okay. And then as far as companies that are running on EOS, interesting story there. So Gino's 10-year target when it originally started was 10,000 companies running on EOS, as measured by someone who had professionally implemented with a professional implementer. So we blew through that a couple of years ago, and so now we're headed towards 100,000.
Wow.
So we're, I don't know what the latest number is, maybe 30 or 35,000, something like that. And then we believe that for every one of those that has professionally implemented, there's probably 10 that have done it kind of on their own. They've self-implemented. So that kind of gives you an idea of how big that number may be. It's hundreds of thousands.
I mean, there's definitely a pattern in my work where I'm finding more and more people that are using EOS and these things that we talked about today. And is there anything that have you ever worked with a restaurant in terms of being an implementer?
I have.
Are there anything that's unique relative to the restaurant industry that might not fit the mold of EOS exactly? So
not really. I mean, the challenging thing is how you get the service staff hooked into the meeting pulse at the more granular level, on the weekly level or daily level. And so, we don't prescribe like a daily huddle, but that's super important. It feels like for the restaurant industry, and not just a daily huddle, but maybe a shift huddle or different things like that. So you've got to pull your, whatever works for you there. But the idea, the principle underneath that, just recognize, is about connection. It's about making sure everyone is plugged in and connected in a way that we can communicate to them, they can communicate to us, and we can tap into their brain power to solve the issues, solve the puzzles that we're trying to solve along the way that ultimately helps everyone.
Yeah. And so would that daily pulse be an L10 format in terms of the level 10 weekly meeting, similar to it?
Yeah. So it does. I mean, some of the restaurants that I've worked, and I haven't worked with a ton, but I've worked with like restaurant consulting companies that work with a lot, right? And they also operate concepts of their own. So I've kind of seen it from both sides, and I've worked with some other just straight up restaurants that have like a single brand concept. So I wouldn't necessarily be that rigid. So I think as long as one of the meeting pulses that they're plugging into has something like the level 10 agenda. But then I think what I'm saying is that I think there's another more frequent pulse that happens that's not that robust. That's kind of here's the biggies for today. Boom, boom, done.
Yep. Got it. Anything we did not discuss today that you were hoping would come out of today's conversation? Question I should have asked you.
Yeah, just that. I think we hit all the main things. I think the punchline for me, Eric, is just it's the power of that role and the power of that duo combination. So a visionary integrator that works, that they have a strong relationship, they trust each other, they're firing on all cylinders. The impact they can drive through their organization, through to the people in their organization and beyond, is unlike anything that you see. I'll give you an example of that thought. So we talked about how challenging it can be to go find that integrator when you have to go look outside, which is most commonly the case. And I'll also tell you, it doesn't always happen. In fact, more often than not, it doesn't happen on the first time.
Yeah.
So
it's like marriage today.
So prepare prepare for a little pain there. And I have a client so I went through my clients, and for my clients the average was 1.4. It took 1.4 tries to get it right. Okay.
Yep.
The one that took the longest was 4 tries.
Wow.
And it was painful. And to that visionary's credit, they persevered. They didn't give up hope. They learned every time they turned that crank, and it didn't work. And then they finally hit it on number 4, and it was like, pew! They just took off like a rocket. No pun intended, but that's exactly what happened.
I think you have some tools for basically like online dating for this combination, don't you?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different things. If you go to rocketfueluniversity.com and look, there's a connection course. So it kind of walks you through these things that I'm saying you need to do to really know yourself as a visionary, that helps you understand what you're really looking for, getting clarity on that, and then some pathways and tools to kind of help you really begin to look for it in the world.
What else can we find at Rocket Fuel University?
Well, lots of things. So there's a course called Rocket Fuel 101, which is free, and it's video teaching for kind of some of the basics. Think of it as the video version of some of the key principles in the book, some of the things we've talked about today, so going a little bit deeper there. We have a masterclass training that's available for both visionaries and integrators. Both of those teach what it looks like to be truly great as either one of those roles, and kind of 10 pillars of greatness that you need to be really strong at. And then for integrators, we have another step beyond that where they can join our Integrator Mastery Forum, which is like a peer group for integrators. So you can imagine sitting in a room with other folks that are dealing with the same kind of stuff you are, realizing that you're not alone in this stuff, and learning from each other, helping each other, hopefully get there a little bit faster, and hopefully get to where you're trying to get without, stepping in all the holes. Everybody doesn't have to go through all that pain.
And you do have some new projects coming out that I want to give you a chance to spread the word about. 2 new books?
3 new books.
3 new books.
Yeah. So this fall, the Visionary book. So I don't have the final title yet, but you can kind of think of it as How to Be a Great Visionary. Then in the spring, another book on exponential freedom, which is about the 9 domains of freedom and how to define those for yourself and how to go get whatever your unique freedom is. And it turns out that yours looks different than mine, looks different from our friends. So if you don't know what that looks like, then it's going to be tough to go get it and make it happen. And then in the fall of 26, the Integrator book, or How to Be a Great Integrator.
Beautiful. I can't wait for those to come out. I will be, I think it'll be an audio. I'm a big audio book person. I'm driving all over the country.
I love audio. What speed did you listen to Rocket Fuel?
1.5.
There you go.
Yeah. I usually listen at times 2, so I slowed it down to be sure.
I'm 1.5 to 2.
Yeah. So this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much. If we want to follow up, if we want to reach out to your organization, any special links or anything we should know about in terms of connection? Yeah,
just for me, I'm at Mark C. Winters on pretty much any platform that you want to find, and the website is markcwinters.com, and all the links to everything are there.
One more thing. If I were to follow up and get a restaurant group or a consultant that specializes in restaurants and EOS, who comes to mind? You said you work with some people. I'm always looking for the next guest.
Well, so one of those is actually an EOS implementer now.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can introduce you to that person
Okay, we'll tell me off air, but I
Yeah.
definitely want to lead from that. I know you know so many people, and we are at time, so I'm going to say goodbye now. And this is where I say I literally cannot do what I do without people like you making time for me to share your knowledge, to take us one step further. There is no questioning, my man. You are unstoppable.
Thanks, Eric. Been
Cheers.
fun.